think it's so interesting. It says so much about, I suppose, there are middling experiences in the society, and these are all spaces in the story that everyone reading these stories aloud, hearing them everywhere, would recognise. So yes, we have the barber shop, which was a predominantly male-dominated space, by the way. Yeah. Women didn't necessarily go to hairdressers in the same way they might cut their hair at home, especially in the lower classes. As we said, it would do things like shaving, hair cutting, tooth extraction, in to get a good shave, and now you've got no teeth. Things like hair oil, perfumes, wax, that kind of thing. So you could kind of come out being pretty cleaned and zhuzhed. The pie shop as well. So these were everywhere. These are like your crepes, your pastas, basically. Although, not to say that they are serving human food.
No, yeah. Imagine not even. So, okay, that's interesting that they are that on the go, grabbing this thing.
Yes, very much so. These could either be a fixed location, like an actual shop that you walk into, but they could also be street traders, shop that all they'd be pushing along from the bars or bars, they'd put homes and like that. You get night stores as well, so you could get a time under pretty much any time in the holiday. And these were meals for you back in the lodgings. Maybe if you're a single individual and you're not going home to a family scenario, you're going home to a lodging house and your bed and board doesn't include a dinner, an evening meal or something like that. In 1851, there were between 500 and 700 pie shops that were at fixed locations and 1,000 street traders. So they really are everywhere. What could you get inside them, I hear you ask? Well...
What could you get inside them, Maddie?
A variety of meats.
Variety?
Mutton, beef, sounds vaguely acceptable. Yeah. Rabbit, not so keen. Eel.
No.
Now we know Anthony's eaten eel before on our live show. Would you repeat that experience? Especially not with pastry. That's not the one. The texture of that with pastry? No, thank you. Charles Dickens, talking of, joked about pies containing whiskey notes. So often it wouldn't really be identifiable what you're eating.
That's a dog.
Yeah, and obviously think about just like the hygiene levels. And if you're getting one of those street trader, when was this pie cooked? When did the animal that's inside this die? Is it one animal or is it several animals? There's no regulation.
Yeah, I know. I mean, haven't we had something recently ourselves where something was forced used?
Like a few years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was, well, so this is a really important thing that was legislated against in the 19th century, because this really was an issue, right, that you would get these meats where you couldn't identify them, and people would often purposely alter the food. So there were lots of alteration scandals. So in the 1850s, people were putting alum in flour, and also they were using unknown meats, and then also putting narcotics in beer, which is like, exactly, like, give the people London a chance.
I don't like this. That's
yeah, it's not great. There was a book published in the 1800s called The Mysteries of Adulteration. So like this was a really big thing. And by 1860, there was an Adulteration of Food and Drink Act that made it illegal to knowingly alter foods, so to augment them with things or to add in extra stuff. But 1860 is quite late. So for the first few decades of the Victorian era, certainly of the 19th century, people are just stealing whatever is put in front of them.
If you're in North America and you listen to this, isn't your beef being injected and isn't your all that kind of stuff?
I was doing a recipe today and it was an American recipe for some chicken, and it said to dry your chicken beforehand. I was like, why is it wet?
Why is it wet?
Why is it wet?
What the hell is a wet chicken?
Right in and tell me why your chicken is so wet.
Now, one thing I want to know from this discussion of wet chickens is often these people, talk about Dracula in terms of our literature thing, and there's a real person behind it, even if it's Victorian, but they're looking to another time or another place, or another country, whatever, that has inspired this figure. Is there a Sweeney Todd?
There are several potential Sweeney Todds from different periods in history. Okay, so I'm going to give you a few of them. One of the sort of main contenders, let's say, is actually not from London at all, but from Paris in the 14th century. So probably not quite so again in the 15th century, probably more Florian death. Now, supposedly lived on to Rue de Malmaison. Excellent. Malmaison?
Yeah, no, I just think it's one weird.
I don't know why this street is called this, but it is still a small street near to Notre Dame. So it still exists. there's no real proof that he ever existed.
I would say, I hate shit like that.
Yeah, I know, it's so frustrating. But I will say, from the 17th century onwards, we do see him appearing in different Adventure Chronicles. He's a barber who is connected to a pastry shop. Actually, yeah. And the idea is that he lures the customers in, he shaves them, cuts their throats, drops them down a trap door, so we do have that. And that he's then making kind of the meat, which apparently the Parisians can't get enough of it, not realising what it is. I think it's fantastic.
Well, that's definitely the origins of this story, even if it's itself only a story.
It's the origins, I would say, it's an example of trope that continues throughout.
Even if it's not the origins.
There are other versions.
Go on.
So in Britain, in England, we do have two different versions. There's a late 17th century broadside ballad called Bloody Barber of Bishopgate, which I love the illustration of the 17th century. And he is meant to be, this is kind of circulated in cheap print again for sort of popular consumption. And it's a song about someone who lures the customers, cuts the throats, hides the bodies, and they are discovered by accident. There's no claim in that one of him making women pies. Not like that. In the 19th century, so closer to the early 19th century, this is like, but we are getting closer to the actual Sweeney Todd era. There was a pie man of St Giles, and there were bones found in the cellar of this pie maker's shop. And the rumours were that some of the bones were human. And this became kind of slang, and if you had a St Giles pie, it basically meant a pie with anything in it. You didn't know what it was. So it was like shorthand for like, this food's a bit dodge, basically. There are other examples from across Europe. Get ready for some German pronunciation. So there's a German story called Der Menschenfressenbäcker. You're welcome.
I can't tell you what about that is.
I'm guessing bad. And this is an 18th and 19th century folk tale about a baker who, during wartime shortages, uses dead soldiers to put in his pies. Which, we're thinking that sounds far-fetched, but you've got to think about the battlefield at Waterloo.
Waterloo.
Waterloo. By human beings, but their teeth were taken. Teeth. They were, I think, weren't they kind of boiled down to make agricultural manure? Things like that, a lot of the bodies. Because if you look at the battlefield now, there's hardly any archaeological record of the actual bodies of that battle on that field, because so many of them were taken away and used in certain ways. So, that was a thing. One more is the Barbieri Assassini. Apologies to my Italian cousins out there, who I know one of them. I know one of them does listen to this, and he'll be gesticulating in Italian to me right now. This was a murderous barber in 16th and 17th century Venice or Bologna, depending on the story that's being told. Yes. And again, he slits throats, he robs the customers, he kills foreigners when they come in for a shave in some versions of the trapdoor. There's no I shot there. So look, there are a lot of different versions, and I think it speaks to the anxiety of going to a barber shop, and don't forget in some of these earlier periods, it's a barber who might aid you in the cutting off of the limb as well as tooth extraction, etc., etc. This is more of a surgeon, so someone who's doing bloody and gory things to people alongside having shavings. Just think about being shaved, even in the Victorian era, with the cutthroat razor. The clue is in the name. Have you ever done that? Do you have a cutthroat razor?
Oh God, no, I don't. Jesus, I couldn't trust myself with that. No.
Matt's got one at home. It was like a whole shaving ritual. So it's Gucci.
Gucci.
It is a real. It is blade.
You having to shave every day.
So we don't have periods. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Like you guys got the end of the deal, but.
Sure. I mean, again, periods. Whatever. We got.
Yeah.
Fine.
I figured they'd be flying around.
No, I'm just saying, if you have to put up with one thing, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Rather than, Now, we always talk about this, how these stories and these tropes feed into and appear at times of specific fears or conceptions of infiltration or unsteadiness or tumult or tension. Is there something specific about the time in which our Sweeney Todd in the 19th century appears that gives birth to this type of fear?
I think so. I think it's, what we were saying at the beginning of this episode about feelings of the dangers brought by urbanisation, this idea that anyone was a stranger, you couldn't necessarily trust anyone, you didn't know what they were up to in the city, and that the city itself becomes this kind of dark, dangerous, labyrinthine mess of betrayal and crime and murder, and that there are things going on behind every closed door that you are not party to. And the whole time, the Penny Dreadful and other publications like it are capitalising on that fear and fueling it, right? They're constantly churning out. These publishing houses are known as fiction factories, but they are just churning out these stories of, all these horrible things happening to people. I think also there's a kind of, not so much class tensions, because everyone in the Sweeney Todd story, well, maybe not everyone, but, there's a sense that it's set within the middling and the working classes, right? Like, there's no one kind of aristocratic. I suppose in the original you do have the lieutenant and colonel, who would be perceived in that era to be more respectable, affluent people, but there's a sense of, like, if you are living in the lower stratas of society, you are on your own. You
the
have
mercy
to,
of
yeah,
anything.
you
basically.
have to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Like, nobody's going to help you. Nobody's going to come save you. So I think there's kind of fear there and kind of resentment there that people are buying into in terms of the Penny Dreadful reading that, and it's probably quite accurate in fact. So there's all of that, and just thinking about the setting, thinking about all these spaces that are so ubiquitous, people like the pie shop, like the barber shop, but also there's sort of gothic overtone to everything. London in this moment is becoming increasingly industrialised. It's foggy, it's dark, it's grimy. I always think, you go to certain parts of London today where you have like full streets of Victorian buildings, and they've all, they're now worth like millions of pounds or whatever. All the bricks have been beautifully pressure washed and everything's been restored. And it's hard to get an impression of the grime, the dirt from the horses and carriages, the gas lamps eventually, and the kind of griminess that the marks that would leave and stuff. That these stories are set within that greasy, dirty world of 19th century London.
And adjacent to that is then this idea of escape and what Londoners are doing to entertain themselves, that this feeds into too. So you have, the freak shows, you have Madame Tussauds, you have...
It's all incredibly dark, though. This is escape through... It's like, and I always say this about sort of true crime today, especially the sort of female interest in true crime. It's like, let's go and look at the worst thing that can happen to make us feel better.
Yeah, it's that thing. Well, if we do that, then we're not looking at ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's public executions are still happening, and it just feeds, this type of story feeds into that genre of entertainment as well as it reflecting the history. But in terms of that entertainment, then, is there an evolution that comes from the 1840s specifically? We've talked about the 14th century, for God's sake, so we know there's an evolution, but in terms of the English-speaking...
Yeah, the Sweeney Todd story, I mean, I think you can definitely, legitimately argue that it goes all the way back to the 14th century, and it has this kind of through line, and it's this malleable story that adapts all the time. In terms of the 19th century, yes. So we have the early 1840s Penny Dreadful version of String of Pearls. Then next, in 1847, we have a stage play by George Dibdin Pitt. Then we have other kind of mystical versions. There's a later 19th century version that has like fake blood pouring on the stage. There's trapdoors, like it's very much, it's an adaptation of the String of Pearls story in particular, but it's very much like meant to sort of gilding big spanking for walking out and that kind of thing. It was meant to be really horrible. And then you start to get stage versions that add in humour, which is a little bit of what we see with the musical that we've inherited now, where Mrs. Lovett becomes a more central character, and Sweeney Todd kind of becomes more nuanced and complicated, doesn't it? So you get different versions where he is wronged. So in 1973, jumping to the 20th century, there's a Christopher Bond play that adds the backstory to Sweeney Todd, where he's been wronged and he's seeking revenge for his dead family, which of course we have in the musical now. 1979, we have the Sondheim and Wheeler musical version.
That's from 1979.
Yeah. So the 70s, we have the play and the musical. It's a big moment for Sweeney Todd. And that very much kind of adds this comic focus again. Obviously, there's now music added in as well. And then in 2007, I was right, we have the Tim Burton musical.
I enjoyed it. I went to see it. I love Helena Bonham Carter. I love Tim Burton. I love Tim Burton. It was very much in a Sweeney Todd type place in terms of musical because I trained in musical theatre. That it wasn't just acting; it was musical theatre, and so I was consuming an awful lot of musical theatre at that time.
What is your ideal musical role?
Oh God, role. None now. I don't have any. I don't hold any dreams of musical
Okay,
theatre
but
now.
if you
at
could
the
just step
time,
into one. Okay.
it was Parade by Jason Robert Brown. And
Okay.
it's a grim story.
Don't know it.
Yeah, it was on at the Donmar around that kind of time, actually 2007, 2008, 2009 maybe. And it's about a man who's accused of murdering a young girl in 19th century America. It's about how we never find out whether he does it or not, but it's the whole thing, and it's just sublime.
Good
It's
tunes.
so good. Yeah, but like it's not a rollicking good time, as you might imagine. But Sweeney Todd was up there. One of the first musicals I did after drama school was a Sondheim. We did Assassins. That was the first job, I think. And so, yeah, I was very aware of it in 2007. It was very there, and so I really was.
It was part of your personality.
Yeah, but then when you're a musical theatre person, you just well, I didn't do this, and I was like, oh, I didn't give a shit. But at the time,
If I could sing,
yeah.
Christine, not the Phantom. I mean, I
actually
kind of
want to see you do the Phantom. I don't want to see you do Christine.
I mean, what's he called? He did it in the film adaptation. He couldn't sing either, and he did a great job.
Oh, I haven't actually seen that one. But again, there was a lot of musicals around that time. Because it was around then as well.
Big influx. Yeah, what else was there?
There was Hairspray. There was, this is all, give me a 5-year period here, because this is not all the same year, but...
Les Mis.
Yeah, yes.
Maybe towards the end of that period.
Yeah, it was there. Yeah. And Chicago probably a bit before that.
Oh,
did Chicago start all of that?
I would beat anyone in Chicago. That's just anything.
Yeah.
Delicious.
All of the music theatre. Oh, I didn't begin
And
to.
now, if you want to listen to some British material, I'm seeing another singing the entirety of Chicago.
Yeah, I won't. No, I really won't. But yeah, no, that was a different time. Yeah. Nice. Thank you for bringing me back to my musical theatre background there, Maddie Pelling. That is the history of Sweeney Todd, which even we weren't convinced that there was much of a history. But actually, when you look into what's going on the street level in terms of how entertainment is being consumed, what's influencing that entertainment output, then it's a really interesting way to consume that history and bring a bit of history to that folk tale, that horror tale. So thank you for doing that. I'm enjoying today's episode. If you have chat away in the comments wherever you listen to your podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, let us know your thoughts on Sweeney Todd, on the movie adaptations. If you've seen it on stage, who's your favourite Sweeney Todd if you are a musical theatre kid? I know. But until next time, when we have another gory, dark, or disturbing history for you, sleep tight.
Hey listeners, producer Chelsea back again to share the final part of our Ed Gein deep dive. As a reminder, these episodes originally aired in 2018, but with Gein in the media again, it felt like a good time to bring them back. Today, in part 2, we're following Gein through his arrest, trial, all the way up to his death in 1984. After this week, we'll be taking a short break, and we'll be back in your feeds in December.
Due to the graphic nature of this killer's crimes, listener discretion is advised. This episode includes dramatizations and discussions of murder and assault that some people may find offensive. We advise extreme caution for children under 13.
Here's a joke. Why did they have to keep the heat up in Ed Gein's house? The punchline? So the furniture won't get goosebumps. This was one of the many children's jokes circulating merely days after Ed Gein's 1957 arrest for the murder of Bernice Worden in Plainfield, Wisconsin. These quips became such a hot trend in the state.
That is not what I was listening to, and I've already heard it.
Gein's crimes stirred their own media fascination and uproar in his hometown of Plainfield and beyond. As we talked about last week, the 51-year-old handyman murdered 2 local women, robbed at least 8 graves from 1947 until 1952, and decorated his home with...
Yeah. By virtue of it not being English, it must be Irish. And there's sort of then this uneasy, I think, relationship with folklore and with mythology.
Well, I don't think that's saying that, once the Catholic Church really did come in, we lost them again.
Yeah.
another, because it didn't fit in with Catholicism. It didn't
No.
fit in with.
Well, it didn't fit into the sort of patriarchal structure of Catholicism, which
Yeah.
is all of Catholicism. I agree. But what I mean is, like, it was specifically to sort of root out women wandering the streets.
Women, Very
Which
much.
famously the Catholic Church doesn't enjoy.
No.
Shall we see what happens to them?
Cannot wait. Go on there now.
As the week progressed, despite Miss Bloodworth's struggles, her father's health deteriorated. Bloodworth left the Ireland downstairs with tools apparently make it easier for his two daughters to care for him. It would also give him better views across the countryside where he worked. Word spread through the community that Kavanagh had claimed to have had an encounter with the Banshee, which foretold Bloodworth's death. Despite this, they visited the Bloodworths as was customary when a member of the family was at death's door, and stayed with them long into the night. The final, the locals gathered once more. At this reception, reminiscing about the minister's life as he prepared to leave it, suddenly they looked gravely at one another. They heard an almost indiscernible female moan from outside the kitchen window. An elderly woman attending Bloodworth in the parlour came rushing in to the other locals and confirmed that she too had heard it. Do you know this? The old lady was convinced the Banshee was close. Two men ran outside to catch what they presumed was a very human culprit in the act. After searching the ground, they found the knife filled the coffin and returned to the house. They stood in the door, nothing to be found, the men reported. All quiet outside. It was a great surprise to them, and the first members inside told them that rather than silence that they had encountered outside, they had endured ever more dramatic moaning, cleaning, screeching, and banging inside the house. I'm sure what makes it feel conflicting stories. The two men closed the door behind them and re-entered the kitchen.
Oh, neeb.
This went on with the first slices of light pushed across the darkened horizon. Then the keening stopped and all still. At that moment, the great-great-grandson Charles Bloodworth succumbed to his illness. Part of this world.
In bow.
What an awful way to go.
Which one?
Like roaring and wailing and keening and screeching.
What idea, like?
No, the really fearful.
Well, now he wasn't roaring and wailing.
No, the
But
Banshee, but the
around,
idea
yeah.
of the Banshee seems so, for a nation that purports to be so good with death, knows how to breathe and don't.
So that's what makes me in the story is in this movie anyway, we have a really sanitized relationship with death actually, and home, and I know that is still quite different in Ireland generally, and to me the Banshee, the fact that she's outside the house, then she's inside the house, she's upsetting the peace and the quiet and the calm sort of the sacredness of this moment of someone dying. There is a difficulty, I think, in having death in the house. It's maybe more common in the what is in the story of the late 18th century, being still out in the 19th century, but it's not an easy thing. It's uneasy, and the Banshee maybe sort of represents some of that uneasiness. She's sort of violating the home and this peaceful time.
It's interesting. Having been in a house where somebody was survived, very much feels like that, actually, without the scream.
They can be screaming and keening or whatever, somebody's doing it naturally. Yeah, I just sort of think that there's something so punitive about it, and something so you did wrong in this fight to avoid the inevitable part of his death. And that doesn't seem to be involved with this story at all. His only crime, as I can figure out, in 17 blah is that he happens to be a minister. So therefore...
But you see, this is the thing. I don't think this particular one is, this particular story, I mean,
is a vengeful.
Yeah, because we grow up with going, you want to avoid that.
Yeah, you want to avoid it. It's like, be good, or, all these sorts of things. It's more punitive. And like the idea of, I'm going to harken a guess that there are no religious banshees. But the idea of, minding your father in the front room as he looks out, and through his very, very final couple of hours, and having this wailing and horribleness and screeching. I'm not sure what this story is, then, apart from, I have an example from my family history, that we had a banshee.
You know what I think about this? The great-great-grandson played in Irish. I think that's what it is. In that they come to us, Banshee comes to us, and despite our kind of...
Her appearance authenticates his Irish. Do you think as well, though, there's such a tension between him being a minister, that he's a man of the church, and he's coming up against a figure from a completely, a supposedly completely different belief system. They are obviously influenced in complicated ways, but that there's a kind of tension there, a sort of contrast, maybe. Maybe, yeah. Like the idea of that particular faith not being, or the value system, or faith system not being Irish, maybe? Being... Yeah, and that she's the sort of the epitome of Irish. Or is it that this brilliant man is dying? This brilliant man with lovely Irish spoken, with great ancestor, and a heart that's like already elevated historically, bardic tradition, etc. That his demise could only bring the banshee who would wail and keen and weep for this great man's passing.
Yes.
That it's actually
He earns it.
He's earning, that there's some sort of preemptive heralding towards bringing him to death. Love that for him.
It is. I think, did you? I want to see because I don't think it was just really happening. But had you ever any kind of family encountering personal banshee story type things when you were growing up?
No, but I would think that I would hear her, especially around television.
You would think that there was a threat that was going to happen.
Completely, and there would be the exact same, like I'd be trying to put my fingers in my ears for fear.
See? I wasn't losing the room myself.
Well, I think growing up in Ireland in the 80s, we were all students of it. So I also used to go down the corridor of the house if I was the last one going to bed, and I would be muttering Hail Marys under my breath for fear Virgin Mary could come to the after shadow. Like, please, Virgin Mary, do not come to me.
Are you dead people like don't talk to me?
I can't, Grandma, I cannot be dealing with you. Reschedule that.
I honestly, because I know we never talked about this before.
No, really?
But I think that's the thing, not tonight.
Not tonight, Margaret. I always am in awe of, like, young kids who, sort of, when they're told, when they're wearing any form of religion, that they wear it lightly. How do you know? Like, why aren't you believing it? Who whispered in your ear that you don't really have to take it up Thursday?
Yeah.
Like, please can turn up at Christmas.
Yeah.
I mean, why wouldn't you go in hell for leather? Why wouldn't, if you're told about the banshees, go, well, I mean, it makes as much sense as anything else.
My nephew thinks that Jesus is one of the Avengers. Like, he doesn't know that that's a...
What would that outfit look like?
I don't know. I was like, no, he's not one of those. And he's like, oh, okay.
Right? Wearing it so lightly.
Yeah.
But, like, even with fairy folk and all,
Oh, yeah. Jesus, he was good. Yeah, very cool. Yeah.
Not the same way. I know in Ireland, we hear the famous anecdotes of roads being rerouted because fairy trees don't want to be disturbed and that kind of thing, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. You did that.
I think so. In English folklore, I think fairies are absolutely a thing. They're present in the landscape, but they're not taken as seriously, or they're not seen as tangible in the same way.
They're not either, but at the same time, you wouldn't take the risk. You don't that kind of way.
I know, but I feel very uncomfortable here. I like being in a room full of things. I genuinely do, because we just can't even come across like.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Ages.
That's why I was rolling back. I was like, well, we do take it seriously, but we don't take it seriously at the same time.
But like, because there's such, it has been used as a reason to not take us seriously.
Yeah.
So any discussion of superstition, because you I can't separate it from this inheritance of feeling infantilized. And especially, when you move over here, or like all the things you combat when you move over here, and then, it's like, yeah, but you can't.
Yeah.
Don't give them that. These are all just tales.
Yes.
They're interesting tales. We can, like, even to discuss the sort of metaphor of them, the usefulness of the talismans or something, stories as objects to explore something else. I still feel a little bit like, yeah, but we're not pick.
Yeah.
We're very rational.
But it feeds into the saints and scholars thing, right? In that, mind you, she says, we were very rational as we bargained with the Virgin Mary not to appear to us when we're children.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of dichotomy of it, I suppose. But it's that saints and scholars thing, right? It's that storytelling. What we're not wary of is our storytelling.
No.
And our narrative building and our community building through story and our inheritance through story and narrative. And I think, and maybe this is a case and wrap it up, but I think that's probably where the Banshee lives.
I think so. And there's something that suits both parties in this when it's a grey area, because the storyteller can use it for their own needs, and the listener can use it for what they need to do for the storyteller. It can be dismissed, or you can swear that you're telling the truth and still, wink to the next person.
That wink is very important.
And I think that grey area is where a lot of relationships with Ireland and the Irish at this time sort of thing. We'll let you have this, but we're not really telling you the other stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But the Banshee is, if nothing else, is a really new image and a frightening sound.
Yeah.
And she's one that follows Irish people around the world.
That's
right.
right.
When people immigrate.
That's right. Very much in America.
Yeah,
Lots of stories.
Yeah.
Lots of stories of her following them to America. We like to travel.
Well, I think we've probably run out of time, but Siobhan, thank you so much for this amazing discussion, for bringing your bucket along with you today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us. It was a really nice chat. Really nice chat.
Thank you so much for listening to After Dark, Misdeeds and the Paranormal. You can follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and if you want to leave a review, that's always appreciated. Would you say those things?
Only if it's good.
Yeah, obviously only if it's good. Do not bother if it's bad. Thanks very much. We will see you next episode.
Join me 48 hours correspondent Sarah Moriarty on my podcast, My Life of Crime, as I take on true crime investigations like no other. This season, I'm looking into the labyrinth of crime and secrets within families. I'm cutting straight to the evidence and talking to the people directly involved, including investigators and the families of victims. Listen to My Life of Crime with Sarah Moriarty wherever you get this podcast.
It's 2023 and we're standing on the edge of a small road in the Highlands of Scotland. The town is Dornoch in Sutherland, less than a mile from the choppy grey North Sea, beyond which in rough parallel lies the top of Denmark. It's a warm June night, and to one side open grassland stretches away, covered by a cloud of midges and framed by distant mountains. On the other is a house, perhaps no more than 100 years old, plastered with grey pebbled ash, typical for this part of the world. Its garden is bordered by a low stone wall and sheltered only by 2 thin fir trees. But we haven't come to the house, or even the setting. Instead, we're here for a small, unassuming stone, upright and covered in lichen, embedded in the lawn just beyond the front door. Around it, arranged in a circle, are small pebbles, tiny offerings left by tourists and well-wishers. Today, the spot is remarkably quiet, but if you had been here 296 years ago, on another similarly warm June night, the scene would have been very different. In 1727, a woman, afterwards named as Janet Horn, was dragged from a nearby prison to this place, then open land on the edge of an early 18th century settlement. She was naked. Crowds surrounded her, men, women, and children from Dornoch, all drawn from their homes to watch the spectacle unfold. Some jeered and shouted insults, others looked on, afraid. You can only imagine the terror Janet herself must have felt. Until this point, she had endured months in a damp, dark cell, accused and found guilty at trial of witchcraft. Now, in just a few short minutes, she'd be tied up and burned alive at the stake. Hello, and welcome to this episode of After Dark, Myths, Misdeeds, and the Paranormal. I'm Maddie.
And I'm Anthony.
And this week we are on the trail of the Last Witch of Scotland. Now, 1727 is quite late, would you say, for a witch
Yeah,
trial?
I mean, we're into what? Like the sense of enlightenment should be coming through here. Science is gaining popularity. We have more knowledge that we're accruing. Certainly, magic and witchcraft are dying away. This isn't necessarily something that's reaching it's far more kind of a 17th century idea with, you know, demonology after James I, and
That's definitely the period that we associate
Yeah.
witches with in this country, right? And you'd be right in thinking that it's like, because the Witchcraft Act, which allowed for the criminalisation and punishment of women and men accused of witchcraft, was repealed the decade after this case. So it is quite late, and it's one of those cases that's kind of surrounded in all kinds of mist and murk, and it's really difficult to get to the heart of it. And it's a case that matters not only because of the date and because of how late it is, but because it can tell something how Scotland specifically. You know, this is taking place in the Highlands, in the heart of a really rural community and a really specific community. But also it tells us about how we talk about witches now, and how these stories to us, and how they can come twisted and added onto, I guess, and edited over time.
Two questions, right? First one, what happened after the repeal of the Act? So you mentioned there that the Witchcraft Act was repealed a decade after this case. But what changed after that time?
So technically people couldn't be killed for witchcraft anymore. But of course it's not like that legislation is repealed and then there's no more belief in witches. You know, there is of course still an anxiety. These are anxieties that are deeply rooted, especially in rural communities, throughout the 18th century and beyond. And there's still legislation in place in the beginning of the 1800s, the 19th century, that, okay, they're not taking the threat of witchcraft seriously, but there are things like, I think it's the Vagrant Act that outlaws things like fortune telling and stuff like that. And in that case, that's magic that's framed as being fraudulent. So there is an attitude shift happening in the 18th century. We start off, we're still executing people accused of witchcraft, and by the end, it seems a fraudulent thing. But these beliefs in this kind of magical thinking and the anxiety around that continues in the 18th century. So this is a landmark case in one way, but in other ways, it is just a symptom of a community and a society that is, I guess, grappling more and more with these issues of, is magic real, or witches real, and what kind of threat might they pose. But yeah, it's important, and we're going to get into it.
But the second question I had then as a follow-up was, you mentioned that the witch in this specific case was afterwards called Janet Horn. So who was Janet?
So Janet Horn is a it's a name that's given to witches generally in Scotland in the 17th and 18th
So this
centuries.
is a specific
So
person.
this is not a specific person. We don't know her real name. So this is a name that's been given to her in what little written records we have.
That's suspicious, right? Like there's something
Totally.
off about that.
Yeah, and it's really difficult to get to any kind of truth about who she was or what she did or really what she was accused of. There is, like I say, so much kind of murk surrounding this, and it's really, really difficult to understand.
How does she get embroiled in all of this? Like what brings her to the, whoever she was, what brings Janet to the attention of the authorities at the time?
So the information that we do have about her, and it is sketchy, is basically she was accused of witchcraft along with her daughter. Now, her daughter, according to, and this is crucial, later 19th century sources, and we're going to get into this.
Again, something suspicious here. But
Something suspicious.
Eve. Soma. Open? Please, Shinoba. Pliva. Bibdo. Bibdo Bespo. Glue competitive. Shusa. Shusa. Hello, me. Who would say? Cider. What? Basamu. Kanaya. Huh? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Going away. Stummies. Tribnoid. Chilo. Hello, Mish. Pliva.
Bin verhebt, Timfi, Cheflet Sacranario, Fwash, Tom Brabo Car, Bzrik, Pushar, the Paro Pasa, Vips Wabita, Lampim, Seraphi, Fanosa Labratus, Swars Pakitsuni, Bratza, Omov, Sikafoof. Wef Wemp, Benu Siblerf, Genuix a Flan, Sabi, Blofa, Balafoy, Aragab, Parsafe Froben, Skuma, Blasho Anafej, Ship Pinaruja Sapa, Maxine, Zappin Quarjabin, Shim the Paro Shabini Janin, Wafita, Abo, Zamona, Awuvine Zafis. Yibsy, Fadish. Ew, Mac. Hey. Simsay.
Yamsul. Befallen Arbo. Camus Bantrip.
Bobkaro Musti.
Bobsini, Nabora.
Hello, Bar. Jiklabor? Demoy? Ah! Oh. Swaby. Ugh. Huh? Aw, Gibson!